All right, man, peace. So as we all know by now, NBA super dad Lavar Ball is planning on creating his own basketball association for top high school blue chip prospects who do not want to go to the NCAA and just want to advertise their skills while getting paid. Of course, Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman are going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Antonietta, thank you kindly. So Lavar Ball's Junior Basketball Association for nationally ranked players who have graduated from high school but don't want to go to college. Max, I'll start with you. Do you like, love, or just hate this?
I love this, and it's very Lavar Ball. Whatever else you want to say about him, there doesn't seem to be artifice there.
Yes, there is no artifice there at all. And that is the main reason why so many of the mainstream liberal media demographics are having a hard time getting a quote-unquote hold on him. They don't know how to handle him right now because he is not prone or privy to any of their politically correct psychobabble. He's not a conformist, so therefore he cannot be controlled. He can't be manipulated. And when someone cannot be controlled or manipulated, that means that what he does next cannot be anticipated. So Lavar Ball is a wild card, and the powers that be are going to have to try to conjure up a way to deal with him. This is why Lavar Ball is an excellent example for the three-dimensional thinking so-called black man, the black man with a ruling class mentality. And at the end of the day, look, he's always going to cause a great amount of division because slave-minded niggas are never going to be able to understand a person like a Lavar Ball. They're going to be too busy quibbling about what they think he should be doing with his kids and other bitch-made shit that slave-minded niggas like to go on and on about. Instead of worrying about how they can make themselves a producer, they're worried about what the next man is doing with his children. And none of his children are being promoted to engage in any form of criminality or anything that is off-putting. So that's why when LiAngelo gets into the situation that he got into, everyone tries to keep that situation and that storyline going, because that plays into the image that they would like to portray about Lavar Ball, so that they can take attention away from what he is actually promoting, which is the black man to think on a high level.
There doesn't seem to be hypocrisy there. He says what it is. He sends his kids to school, to college, to UCLA, a great institution. He sends them there to play basketball. Not about an institution of higher learning. It's to play basketball.
And that, once again, is what the college or university system is about. You go to college or to a university so that you can become adept at what you plan on doing after college. You don't go there to become informed, because college does not inform anyone. It doesn't inform anyone. What it's supposed to do is prepare you for life after college. If you're trying to figure out what actually has occurred in history, or any form of reality-based information, college is not the place to go, because college is based on a curriculum. Right? The term curriculum comes from the Latin word currus, meaning a current, like a water pathway. That's why even in the scriptures, knowledge is compared or likened unto water. You go to a college to get watered. So you engage in or you participate in a curriculum. So you drink of those waters. Whatever you drink is what's going to be used to satiate you. It doesn't mean that water is actually pure water. It's just water. Point being is this: when you want to find out the truth, that is always going to be a personal path that you have to take. You don't go to college to get informed. You go to college to get educated. It's a major difference.
And for so many collegiate athletes who hope to go on to a pro career, especially in the last couple decades, that's what college is. And the NCAA is, for many, a glorified minor league, especially for the NBA. And it's a great minor league because it also builds stars. So by the time the player is developed enough to play in the pros, ostensibly developed enough, they're already stars.
Exactly. And that is why the NBA prefers for the college athlete to stay at least 1 year. They would prefer 2 or 3 years, because that allows the player not only to develop their skill set, but it also allows them to develop their brand more, so that when they come into the NBA, people know who they are. And that's the big conundrum that they're having, and that's what started really with not Kobe Bryant, with Kevin Garnett, and then the next year Kobe Bryant, where what they basically did was they destroyed NCAA basketball, because those of us who remember in the late 80s, early 90s, college basketball was as exciting as NBA basketball. The stars in college basketball were as well known as the stars in NBA basketball, or close. So when Kevin Garnett destroyed that paradigm and decided to come straight from high school into the NBA, and then Kobe Bryant did it the next year, and then the next year Tracy McGrady did it, that really helped to start the fall of college basketball. So the NBA has been scrambling since then, trying to figure out how to appease the NCAA, which is their business partner, and at the same time try to reinforce a way to make sure that they can brand these kids while in college, so that when they come into the NBA, they're more well known, because it's great for everybody involved when the product that's coming into the NBA is known by the consumer.
And so it works out for everyone except the student athlete who never really wanted to be a student, who really just wanted to play basketball. Whatever I personally think about that, go to college, enrich your life, become a fully formed adult, have that experience, that's not my business, really.
And you also do not go to college to become a fully formed adult, because people coming out of college at 22 years old are still not fully formed. Most of the time, all they've learned in college is whatever they were indoctrinated with in their quote-unquote curriculums. And also, they normally were turned out into some form of pansexuality and drug use. Let's be for real. This is why people say, for the most part, what did they do in college? They quote-unquote experimented, right? So really all the college system is, that I've gone into this numerous times, it's just a grove system. Goes back to the old Babylonian Kemetic mystery school system. That's all it is. And I don't poo-poo it, because you can go there and put yourself in a position that when you're out of college, when you quote unquote graduate from college, that you're ready for a better life after college. So that's the point of the university or college system. But it's definitely not the point to go there to get informed, or to leave there a fully formed human being, because nobody leaves quote unquote college at 23 fully formed. Most of the time they're just debt-ridden and confused.
We live in America. People can make that determination for themselves and for their children. And that's none of my business. And so for people who just want to go play basketball, this is great. And I love it, because even the pay scale, $3,000 for the bottom-ranked kids a month, $10,000 for the top-rated guys, the NCAA has got to be hoping this doesn't work out.
Absolutely.
Because we're not talking about making the NCAA athletes rich by and large, although some of them deserve to be. We're talking about paying them money so they can walk around and not do things like, I don't know, shoplift and get into other kinds of trouble, or accept money under the table because they are being compensated like anyone else amateur who does anything amateur in college. If they're a musician, whatever, it's not prohibited from making money, in other ways. So the point is, I don't know if this is going to work. It's very unlikely that any new league ever works long run, but I love the idea, Stephen A. I love the idea.
Well, I don't love it and I don't hate it, so the operative word would be like. And a couple of points that I'd like to make. You religiously bring up, whether or not somebody has the right to do something. Nobody's challenging their right. We're asking you how you feel about it. And anytime somebody...
Well, see, that's the problem that we have here in so-called, quote-unquote, this free society, is that people are encouraged to speak their viewpoint according to their quote-unquote feelings. People's feelings very rarely benefit anyone other than themselves. So what is the relevance of you speaking according to your feelings? We need you to speak according to your facts. Now, if you want to say that such and such league is not likely to work because of history or a track record, then that's pertinent, that's relevant. But I don't care about your feelings. Your feelings don't benefit anybody but yourself.
If somebody does something in public view, folks have an opportunity and have a right to have an opinion about it, just like, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, I understand that, but at the same time, sir, you're supposed to be a high-level member of the sports media. So you should speak according to something other than your emotional feelings about a stance or a subject. No. Really, your emotions are not going to help anything. So you must provide some type of context based on facts.
It's one of those situations where you look at Lavar Ball right now, you can't hate on it because anything that provides additional opportunities for the youth in our country to go about the business of monetizing themselves in a legal and productive fashion, it's something that we should applaud and we should support if we can. It's why I support Ice Cube with his 3-on-3 ball tournament in the offseason, in the NBA offseason. I'm incredibly proud of what Ice Cube has been doing. Guys like LL Cool J and others have been adamantly supporting him in his venture in that regard. And I think we should continue to do so. This is something, obviously, that we have to look at it with some skepticism, because the first question that I would have is, where's the big baller getting the money from?
Why are you concerned about where he's getting his money from? This is the same question that I asked in the previous video that I did on this subject. Why are all these media members concerned about where he's getting his money from? Do you work for the IRS? Are you with the FBI? Are you a representative of a bank? Why are you concerned about where he's getting his money from? Don't worry about it. Are you trying to be an investor? Are you currently an investor? What type of question is where is he getting his money from? The only question that you should be asking about the league is, how are they going to attract scouts to give the kids who are going to play in the league a competitive opportunity to be seen and go to the NBA? That's really the only relevant question that you should be asking. How are they going to allocate appropriate venues for the children, for the kids to be seen so that they can get to the NBA? Because that's what the league is promising. They're promising that the top prospects will be seen and that they'll have a competitive opportunity to go play professional basketball. In regards to worrying about how Lavar Ball is going to receive his funding or where he's getting his money from, that's a question for his sponsors. That's a question for his investors. That's not a question for the media. Really, the real reason why they're asking that question of Lavar Ball is because he's a so-called black man, so they don't expect him to truly have the connections that he needs to make a business venture lucrative, to make it functional. Once again, and I've stated this numerous times on my channel, so-called black people, they love to talk about black businesses and black economics and politics. And then when you see someone who actually has the courage to go out and actually do something and not just talk about it all day, the first people who are the biggest naysayers are the same so-called affluent blacks who claim that the solution for the problems in the black community revolve around the problems with economics. Now, I'm not going to include the segment that was on Undisputed with Shannon Sharpe and Skip Bayless, but Shannon Sharpe had the same sentiment as Stephen A. Smith. And remember, Shannon Sharpe likes to cast himself as Mr. Pro-Blackity Black. But he was using terms for Lavar Ball's league as raggedy and things of that nature. I wonder why. Is it because Lavar Ball is not an indentured servant to a corporate structure?
Somebody with deep pockets behind the scenes is clearly willing to finance the Big Baller brand, because how could you afford to pay somebody $10,000 per month? Some of the marquee guys, I'd like to see you pull that off. What kind of money are you getting? What are you generating from it? So it's a question mark there. Again, I don't hate it, because those kind of opportunities present more opportunities for our youth.
Now, multiple times, Stephen A. Smith has used the term hate. I don't hate it. Why is he saying that? Because that is him. That is him having some Freudian slips. He's actually saying that he does hate it. He's saying that he is envious of the fact that Lavar Ball is not an indentured servant like Stephen A. Smith is. Now, Stephen A. is making a lot of money for ESPN, and he's also getting paid a good amount of money. But when you see how they basically slave him out, he has to come on this show. He has to have a radio show. He basically has to be on call for any and all topics. He always has to be ready with his three-piece suit on to get on camera and speak on sports issues that for the most part he really doesn't know or understand what he's talking about. But because he has a good mouthpiece, he's given a platform to opine. Many of these so-called blacks who are affluent, boule Negroes per se, who are caught in the television rabbit hole, they're really quizzical about Lavar Ball. And they have the "who does this nigga think he is" mentality. And this is why they're so split within their own mind on whether or not they support this venture. How could you not support this venture? Either it will work or it won't. But this is a person who is daring to do something. How could you be against it? It's not illegal. You claim that you want so-called black people to have more control over their own future. Here's a man who's trying to do that. What is the problem?
Who aspire to be professional athletes someday. So I definitely applaud that. But the reason why I can't love it is because of Lavar Ball. And what I mean by that is saying this. I appreciate his entrepreneurial spirit. I appreciate the fact that he stands up for what he believes in and he's unapologetic about it. But just because I appreciate it and I genuinely like him doesn't mean that we get to approve of every single thing that he does. Think about the things that...
Sir, please listen to what you just said. You basically just said that you like the idea, but you're not crazy about it because of the person who is the mastermind behind the idea. And I touched on this theme in the previous video with Jason Whitlock and Colin Cowherd and Christine Leahy. It's very, very clear that they have a personal dislike for this man, Lavar Ball, even though Stephen A. Smith claims to like him. He has a personal dislike for him. Once again, the only reason for it is that they are offended by the fact that Lavar Ball is not a conformist. And people who are conformists will never understand people who are quote-unquote nonconformist. Because people who are nonconformist do not have the mental shackles of feeling compelled to be accepted by others. That liberates them and allows them to have the courage to try things that people who are conformists do not have the courage to try. And that's the real genesis of the antipathy towards Lavar Ball. It's just jealousy that he has courage that they don't have. And once again, this is not a personal... I don't have any personal stake in the Lavar Ball or anti-Lavar Ball issue, because I already know how people interpret everything. Most people are low-level thinkers, and therefore they interpret everything emotionally. They basically divvy everything up into you like this person or you don't like that person, because they don't have the cognitive function to be able to separate emotional like from an objective evaluation. Stephen A. Smith, as a media member, should be able to objectively evaluate what Lavar Ball is getting involved with. And if he's a true journalist, then he should know how Lavar Ball is getting his funding for this prospective league. He should have did his due diligence and made some calls. Why is he saying, I don't know how he's getting this money? Well, you're a journalist. Find out.
He does. You know, the way you bloviate, the way you talk, and the way you're pulling your son out of high school, you're pulling your son out of college. You've got to wonder what kind of message that sends.
What's the message that is sending is that, you know what, when a roadblock is put in your path, find a way around it or through it. Don't just sit back and vegetate because people are telling you the answer is no. If you have a certain goal and people are putting up a stumbling block, then you must get over it. All right? If people are trying to knock you down to stop you from achieving your goal, then you have to get up and keep moving forward. That's the message that I get from it.
You also have to wonder about who's really going to support you in terms of advertisers and sponsors willing to patronize your brand. Again,
well, if you were that concerned with the sponsorship aspect of how a business is run, then Stephen A. Smith, you would have left ESPN already and tried to form your own network. Clearly, you're not concerned with that component because you're still stuck on being an indentured servant, somebody who's just receiving a check. So don't try to act like you're interested in the background business aspect of being an entrepreneur. Because if that was the case, you would not be the most famous face at ESPN and still prone to being suspended off of statements that you make that were innocent in intention, and where you basically have to take you basically have to be subservient to a cokehead female like Michelle Beadle, who can say that you're making misogynistic statements when you were not. So we all know that you have to know your place at your corporation. So don't try to act like you're interested in how businesses are run in the background, how they're getting their funding. Because if you actually were, you would have left ESPN and started your own radio station or started your own network.
Again, you may have some folks, but then again, you may not. It's a question mark. And when you look at the history of the Ball family, clearly he was exceptional because people have looked at Lonzo Ball this year and wondered whether or not he deserved to be a lottery pick. But because of Lavar Ball, not only did he get picked number 2 overall, the Lakers were pressured into having to take him. There was no way they could pass up on him. That was genius. But pulling your son out of high school, pulling another son out of college, your son goes to another country, he commits robbery, and you're saying...
No, sir, no. Robbery is when you go into a business or an establishment with a weapon and you force the person behind the counter or the cash register to hand over cash or jewelry. It's not when you go into an establishment and you take a product. That's called shoplifting. What LiAngelo did was shoplifting. It wasn't robbery. So let's please get those terms correct.
Saying that it's not a big deal. It may not be that big of a deal, but that's not something you need to be articulating publicly as a parent. Some people will look at stuff like that and then wonder, why should a kid straight out of high school be associated with your brand? These are the kind of questions. So it comes down to how he's going to conduct himself, how he's going to conduct business, what is he going to do to facilitate growth? Because it's one thing to give folks $10,000, or, which is only some of them. It's another thing entirely to leave them ill-prepared for the real world when it comes to paying bills and doing what you got to do to elevate your stuff and your quality of life.
Well, how come you haven't brought those type of concerns up to John Calipari, who's basically running an NCAA program where he promises that he's going to make kids equipped to be one-and-dones? Is he preparing them for life after college in that one season, Stephen A. Smith? Isn't it interesting that it's okay for a lot of the top-level multimillionaire NCAA basketball coaches to pimp out a lot of these young basketball prospects? People like John Calipari and Mike Krzyzewski, it's okay for them to do it. But if Lavar Ball is trying to mastermind his own basketball league, everyone suddenly is concerned about the future of these kids and them not getting, quote-unquote, educated.
What is he doing to assist in that regard when you're talking about financing young kids? All of these things factor into the equation, and I don't think they could be ignored.
Well, good. Then don't ignore them. But then don't ignore them for everyone. Next time you have Calipari on your show, ask him about what he plans to do for a lot of his blue chip prospects who don't turn out to be good players in the NBA. Ask him if he's following up and making sure that they get that they're getting properly acclimated into real society after basketball.
By the way, I hear what you're saying, and sure, you can take it on a case-by-case basis and say, I agree with this piece of behavior from Lavar Ball, I disagree with that, and there's plenty to disagree with.
And I genuinely like him. I do like him.
How could you not like Lavar Ball? Like, I mean, come on. Like, from afar. How could you not like Lavar Ball? I mean, the dude is an entertainer, like anyone else. As I've stated numerous times, I don't know Lavar Ball, so I don't know him to truly like him as a person or dislike him as a person. But as a character who appears on television or in media, how could you dislike him? If you're a so-called black man with a ruling class mentality, how could you dislike his message? How could you dislike his brain, how his cognitive functions manifest? How could you dislike that? Like, give me a break.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I do know how people could dislike it. Let me not say that. I do know how they could dislike it. If you're a weak, low-level, hating-ass nigga, which you have a lot about here, guys who spend more time worrying about seeing other people fall than trying to make themselves rise up. So, yeah, I do understand how people could dislike him. Because you do have a lot of low-level, hating-ass niggas out here.
The overall brand is authenticity, a lack of pretension, a lack of artifice, a lack of hypocrisy, kind of living your life out loud, not kind of conforming to standards that you think aren't good. And by the way, he's basically a fun-loving guy. Like, Lavar Ball transcends sports and winds up on news networks and stuff and even disarms hard-hitting kind of journalists who think they're doing a hard-hitting interview with him, they wind up laughing at the end because he's basically looking to have a good time, and he's welcoming people in. He's not kind of keeping them at arm's distance. So all those things, I think, are on people's minds when they. Now, he's loud and all that stuff, no doubt, but I don't.
Stephen A. Smith, we've already heard what you have to say. We already know what you have to say. Stop trying to cut Max off all the damn time. Like, Stephen A. Smith is like you could tell he was raised by a bunch of liberal black chicks in his home. That feminine energy is so much on him. He does not listen to what his quote-unquote partner is saying. He just waits for his opportunity to respond because for some reason he seems to think that what he has to say is so much more potent than what someone else has to say. And because he doesn't understand that, that's why his show is not as good as Skip Bayless's show with Shannon Sharp.
I don't think that's as much of a turnoff to many as many feel, I think.
Well, it's not just about the loudness, though, Max. It's about how you conduct yourself. Listen, we're on the airwaves every day. You know, we might be demonstrative or bombastic with button heads. We're going at each other and what have you. But there are a lot of things both you and I wish we had the freedom to do, Max.
Ding. You see that? I told you that a lot of these television personality Negroes, they're jealous of Lavar Ball because they're constrained by the corporate structure that they're planted into. They, basically, their check is supposed to be compensation for the fact that they can't speak their real mind. So the real reason why they come against Lavar Ball and they have this quote-unquote love-hate relationship with him is because they're jealous that they can't be who they want to be while he can.
But we work for people. We have an obligation to be responsible not just to ourselves, but the brands we represent, etc., etc.
Right, but Stephen A. Smith, at this point, you've basically been a major sports media figure for going on 15, 16 years, bro. If you wanted to, you could branch out and form your own radio station, have your own radio company, and be your own boss. So you choose to be a subsidiary of a corporate structure where you have to abide by other people's ideologies and sensibilities. That's your own personal preference. So you just lack the courage to do what Lavar Ball is doing. And that's why you're upset with him.
And when you take that into consideration, what it does is send the message that you are accountable, that you don't get to operate with impunity, that you don't get to just do what you want, when you want, how you want, to whomever you please, with no repercussions whatsoever. If ever there was a time where you needed to send that message to our youth, it's now. I don't do what I do just for me. I do what I do to make sure that the kind of impact that I have, I'm showing the way towards success. It's not the only way to do things, and I understand that, and there's plenty of better examples than me. But in the end, that has to be the mission. That has to be the goal. It can't just be all about me. It can't just be all about the ball.
That's a great.
Oh, Stephen A., please just stop trying to self-aggrandize. At the end of the day, you're far from being as magnanimous as you try to act like you are. If you were truly concerned about the repercussions that different decisions were going to have on children, especially black children, then you would have struck out on your own and have shown them the way on how to eventually be your own boss. That's the most important thing that a so-called black man can do in this current time period. You're going on and on about making sure that people respect structure and order, and that's really just your way of trying to explain why you're still stuck in that corporate environment and you're still a slave. It's like when Dame Dash was on I believe he was on the Breakfast Club years ago, and he had an interview that people talked about for a long time about being your own boss, and then he brought up Funk Flex and how Funk Flex been on Hot 97 for like 30 years, still doing the same thing. Stephen A. Smith is like the Funk Master Flex of sports media. Funk Flex should have his own radio station. Why does Stephen A. Smith not want to strike out on his own? It's because he would not know what to do if he was not put under a certain amount of rules and restrictions. He wants the so-called white man to rein him in because he doesn't have a ruling class mentality. So once again, a two-dimensional thinking person is never going to understand someone like a Lavar Ball. You can't have a worker try to break down a boss's mindset. It's just not going to happen.
Great
and
point.
sometimes that's not what he's doing.
That's a great point, particularly in our national politics, everything right now. Societal norms are a good thing. They exist for a reason. And yet, because we are constantly subject to them, when we occasionally see, as a culture we see, an example that contradicts them, that doesn't live by those rules, that is not as constrained by them, we can live vicariously through that person a little bit, and we like them on the scene. And I think that's Lavar Ball, and I don't see anything in this proposed league that would be so damaging to the youth. And incidentally, it's not mutually exclusive with college. You really want to go to...
You see that? Now, Max Kellerman said, I don't see anything in this proposed league that would be so damaging to the youth. Stephen A. Smith said, we don't know that. Once again, please remember that Stephen A. Smith, and I mentioned this a long time ago, is a boule Negro. What does that mean? The job of the boule is to make sure that there are checks and balances, that there are constant restraints that are put on the so-called black masses, so that when they attempt to elevate to a certain height or throw off mental shackles or constraints, that someone like him is there to say, no, that's not the way. We always have to keep in mind that we must maintain the status quo. That is Stephen A. Smith's job, and he's very, very good at it. And you have a lot of people who use terms like coon and all this other. Look, I don't have time for simple-minded jargon, because as I've stated already, a lot of woke Negroes are coons. A lot of internet revolutionary Negroes are coons by their definition of the usage of that term. So if Stephen A. Smith is a so-called coon, then you have to analyze yourself. What is your real motivation for believing in things like the Black Lives Matter movement, or trying to search for quote-unquote equality, which basically is just you saying that I want to be treated like a Caucasian man? What is your real motivation behind that? So that's why I throw off the usage of those type of terms. But Stephen A. Smith and people like him are set up as a buffer between so-called blacks and the so-called white elite that they aspire to hobnob with or be confederate with. They'll never be confederate with them, but they aspire to be. That's why they come up with conventions like the Divine Nine and the Boule, which is just a black version of the Skull and Bones. They want to replicate them. That's why they call their organizations Greek. Okay, it's a whole other video for another day. But during the Hellenistic period, you had many so-called blacks in the Greco-Roman world who called themselves Greek and who took on the lifestyle of the Macedonians, because they wanted to replicate that. They wanted to be like them. But it is what it is. We'll see what happens with Lavar Ball and his league. Everything that he touches seems to turn to gold thus far, and hopefully it will continue to be that way. But peace.